It is now recording. Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome. So I'm Matteo Gabrielli, the solutions architect. I'm based in London. And yeah, today ready to go through and see how to build modern web application in Python on AWS. The idea, let's say we will spend together an hour. I will start with a quick introduction of myself. And also then we will go through the presentation. What I prepared for you is an overview on what do we mean by modern web application, right? And we will have just an overview on how this is happening on AWS, and then we can look together and I will show you some code, an idea on how it's possible to implement Python code, right, in AWS with a couple of examples, right? Then I will keep also some time at the end for every question, for replying to your questions, but also in the meanwhile, feel free to post it in the chat, and so we can also address your question while going. So starting from my side, I'm, let's say, not only technology in my life, a lot of sports, love them, judo, running, surf. I'm Italian, so actually you can see it from my second sentence that I love to make and fresh made pasta at home from scratch. And yeah, speak also other languages like Polish and Spanish. Love to travel. I moved around. Actually, my path in AWS started more than 1.5 years ago in Madrid. I started with a program that is called TechQ. That was for solutions architects. Then now is already more than 1 year that I moved to London. I have a focus on machine learning. Let's say is kind of my passion in technology. I was doing that during my master thesis on that, specifically on computer vision, and also now, I mean, I'm on some let's say content also creation about machine learning. I'm really passionate about that. Superpower, I can really sleep everywhere, but my goal is also to keep you super engaged and during this presentation, and of course we are not going to sleep. So about what I'm doing in my day-by-day job, I'm working with SMB customers in UK and Ireland, spread all around. All the different type of conversations is what is really nice about seeing SMBs. A lot of customer, all the different areas, from who is doing machine learning project, who is dealing with networking, applications development, and it could be really whatever. From the startup doing some projects and starting with a new workload to other well-established companies that wants to move in the cloud. So yeah, the one on the right side is me, but also this is me, as you see in the circus capabilities. Okay, so let's go and think about and talk about what do we mean by modern, right? We are not that far actually from a situation like this, where people were handling applications development, but also all the infrastructure, right, at home. And now we translate it to something that is more maybe tidy, I would say, where of course also the cloud is doing his part, right, taking care for customers for their infrastructure and application hosting, but also databases and networking and everything they have to do, right? So what are the customers asking usually? Also, let's say my day-to-day job, what is the customer conversation? And usually what they are asking is, yeah, I want an application, yeah, but I want it to be ready to scale to millions of users. Also, yeah, I'm not only in the UK, but I'm planning to go global. I want my application to be quick and is able to respond in milliseconds, right? Also able to handle petabyte of data. And now, going further, we will explore how this is possible. An example of companies, I mean, this is just one of many customer of AWS, right? But as you can see, having these needs and are part of their goals, right? For kind of companies like Expedia. And of course, as in this example, they are gaining operational resilience, right? But also staff productivity that is improved, and also the improves also the business agility, right? Sometimes you want to innovate quick, right? Innovate faster, just to try things, try new workloads and maybe new projects. So, what is the best way to build a modern application? So let's say doing a recap, we can summarize with these 5 points. First of all, architectural patterns. So they want to create something that is also reusable, but also maybe something that it has something already implemented, maybe that is taking, and it says what is doing is being a managed service, right? For example, so something that can speed up, but also simplify what the customer is trying to do. Customers are trying to go as serverless as possible. Serverless, it means without a server. So no EC2 spinning up in the environment to do some computation, right? And this gives more flexibility to the customer on the point of view that they can think and they can focus on the business value, right? On what they have to build and not on managing infrastructure that is underneath. But also, yeah, this brings to increase the developer agility, but also, of course, really important, the part of management and governance of the whole AWS account and the whole organization that is in the cloud, right? Not only if we are talking with a developer that is building something by himself, so he's the only one using the AWS account, but most of the time it happens that it's also huge organizations that have to organize things well and have the correct guardrails and setting the right permissions and all of these things, right? Data management, we will talk about that later, is how I handle data, what are the way of handling, and what is the best way of where should I put the data? Of course, it depends by the use case as well. So yeah, the idea is to provide something for builders, but also for operators, right? And this modernization, actually, it changed the way we are working, right? And there's tools and service that builders use, and also service that operators use, for example, to deploy, debug, monitor what's happening, right? So let's have a look at modern application architectures. So this is a traditional 3-tier application architecture, right? We were used to see a lot of this, and this is still a thing, right? So having these 3 different layers, one, for example, the presentation layer, right? Physically, the part that is interfacing with the customer, right? With the people going on the application. Then there's a backend, a business logic that is handling all the jobs and stuff to do in the background, and a database layer. How this is implemented inside AWS? Something like this. So 3 different layers, as you can see. In point 1, you will see the presentation layer. Point 2, the backend, the business logic, and in the 3rd layer, you can see the databases, right? This is a classic 3-tier architecture and how it's implemented inside AWS. And it is something that is really good. I mean, at least is 3 different tiers, and is not what we call all together a monolith that is heavy and all tied really closely together, right? This is 3-tier architecture. But what we are seeing and what now is happening with modern applications architecture is having all of this behavior that is more interaction between different AWS services, right? For example, Lambda, you can see in the middle event bridge. You can see implemented, for example, some queue or messaging service, right, that are handling the communication and the coupling between these services. Then maybe, and also a data layer, right? So it's still this kind of free tier architecture, but let's say a revisioned version of it. Zooming out in this, actually, what we are doing is just communicating through using APIs through different part of it that are usually services. So how this translates in the AWS language by mentioning some of the services, like, and in this slide you can see the different way of different level on how AWS manage this and what the customer has to manage inside of this. And you will see that the more we are going to the bottom, we have more thing on the customer side, less thing on the AWS side, right? Like, for example, if I have an EC2, AWS is providing the physical hardware, software, networking facility, but the customer has to manage the application code, the data source integration, the scaling, and all of this. Whilst as opposite of that, AWS Lambda is you just put your code inside and execute. So just a recap of what is serverless and what we were looking at. So what are the advantages? Actually, that I don't have to provision any infrastructure. There's no, let's say, the management is something that is getting rid of from the customer side and is something that AWS is taking care of. But also it helps a lot for scaling because most of the time, like for example, Lambda is automated. You just plug your code in, and then if you fire one Lambda execution or 100, it doesn't really change from your side, right? So you pay for value, and also most of the time the highly availability, the one that in EC2 you are doing and making sure that you have an EC2 in you have EC2s in different subnets, right? And you are highly available. Sometimes with serverless service, you don't have to think about that. But serverless is not only about compute. Also, it's free, S3 is serverless, right? There's not EC2 behind that, and also other services like Aurora Serverless, but also DynamoDB, API Gateway, and SQS are all part of what we call the serverless portfolio, right? Also, a lot of stuff both on the security and automation, developer tools, application integration, and for example, the compute part as well, or databases. Talking about databases, sometimes I got asked, so what is the one I have to choose, right? Based on my use case, and this is actually what we do as a solutions architect. We try to understand what are the needs and mapping this to some suggestions, right? Working with the customer, working backwards for what the customer wants, and based on that, as you can see in this slide, you can then end up using Aurora or RDS or DynamoDB, DocumentDB, Elasticcache, Neptune, TimeStream. I mean, there's one size is not fitting all, and there's some use cases that are more suitable sometimes for a specific purpose built database, right? Let's talk about operations. What do I mean by operations? So here, what we are seeing is what we call, let's say, and probably most of you already heard this term, DevOps, right? So is all of this pipeline, all of this process of building the code, revisioning this code, but also deploying this code, monitor what's happening, and this is what DevOps is. Now, let's have a look on how it works, in this case, the operations, when we are dealing with monolith. So I usually imagine a monolith application like a huge stone, right? Something that is heavy, something that has all the code, all the stuff in a single place, database as well, data, and it's not easy, right, to maintain this big stone, let's say, this because it's not modular, let's say, right? So also when you are starting creating and dealing with this application, you have to all the people working, let's say, on the same code, and so also the pipeline on how to release these codes is a common one, right? Whilst in the what's the how now a lot of teams, a lot of people are working is about creating services. So you want to create independent service and having, for example, a delivery pipeline for each of these, right? What are the advantages? Of course, you are creating something that is modular. It could be reusable, but also you don't have to scale, for example, the whole monolith. You can scale single services, right? Maybe we have different functionalities. It could be the payment system or the front end. Maybe the front end doesn't have to scale, but the payment system has to do a lot of stuff. So maybe we should scale this, right? And this modularity gives us the possibility of actually achieving these goals. A little bit of story. This is exactly what happened in 2001 to Amazon.com. So they had this monolithic application, a lot of team working on that. And then the concept of pizza teams, right? 2 pizza teams. So let's create a smaller group that are working independently on each of these services or microservices, right? What are the advantages? That in this case, we will have full ownership, right? These 2 pizza team are the one owning this. They are the responsible for this microservice, right? The development, but also release. So there's full accountability. And this is the best way to start and going into this DevOps culture, right? And of course, it brings us an advantage that you focus on innovation, right? Because you can experiment more things. You can take another team that is working on a new functionality and start going in there and managing their releases, right? And then start to integrate maybe with the application. So yeah, this is just what we just said, right? Let's go from something that is big to something that is more layered, more managed by this 2 pizza team. Okay, so let's say that I'm a customer. I want to start building something in the cloud, right? What are the several options that I see, or what are the several scenarios that I see for the different use cases from the customers, right? So first of all, as you can see on the right side, there's multiple options, right? So first of all, one option, it could be, look, I have something in my data center and I want exactly to replicate this in AWS. Okay, this is what we call our rehost. Let's take things how they are, right, as it is, and just lift and shift inside the cloud. Or we can replatform. For example, we can move some VMs to containers, or maybe we can move a database from your server to RDS. We can also refactor an application. It means maybe I want to start creating microservices, right? And this could be a journey, you know, how to do that. It's not that everything has to be done on the same, right, from 0 to everything microservices, but it could be something like, okay, let's start creating this kind of approach, right? Let's start to have this kind of approach. And yeah, and reinvent is the cloud native part, right? Let's start adopting serverless services that can help us implement this. Is it everything clear? Do you have any question on that? If you have it, feel free to jump out of mute or to post it in the chat. I will keep it as well monitored, so maybe, okay. If not, let's move to the hands-on part, and let's see what and how we can build this. So wanted to introduce you a service that is called AWS Cloud9, and I find it really useful when, for example, doing some code for customer, but also, for example, now to run these examples, right? Because it's an IDE inside the cloud. So you don't have to you can imagine like your VS Code, your PyCharm, but inside AWS. So it means that it's browser based. So it means that you don't have to install it or whatever, you just access the AWS account and start to use that. You can also, like, there are several features. One of these, for example, is that you can also collaborate in real time, right? I wanted to introduce you as well, because we will use it, to Boto3. Boto3 is the AWS SDK for Python, right? What does it mean? So as we know, in AWS, everything is an API, right? So we are interacting with services through APIs. And Boto3 is the way of doing this using Python, right? So Boto3 is actually a library, right, that we can install. It's a pip install, right, that we do in our terminal. And then we can do and work directly on the EC2 functionalities, but also on the S3 functionalities or all the service functionalities. So we can, as you can see in the first example on the top right here, here we are saying we are dealing with EC2 functionality. For example, if our EC2 is started, right? So you can do this in a code way, in a programmatic way. On the bottom, you will see, you are seeing an example using S3, right? So in this case, what we are doing is creating a bucket and also inserting an object inside this bucket, right? The first line is importing the library. The second one is defining the S3 resource. Third line is saying create a bucket. Fourth line, insert this object, right? Easy as that. And last friend that I will introduce to you is Chalice. Chalice is a Python serverless micro framework for AWS, and we will see how it works now that I will switch to my Cloud9 environment. And what it's actually doing is imagine that you have some code that you want to write, but you actually maybe don't want to step inside the AWS Lambda and creating a Lambda and setting permission and maybe adding some layers and maybe expose this Lambda through an API gateway. You would like to have a level of abstraction more. For example, doing some Python code and saying, yeah, expose this function through in this endpoint, right? And in order to create, for example, an API. And you can just create that and then click deploy it, and it automatically generate the Python functions and also the link to API gateway, right? So I will show you now an example. So I'm going out from this presentation and moving to the Cloud9. So how does Cloud9 looks like? So when I'm in Cloud9, here I'm in the AWS console, you can see my screen properly, right? You can see the AWS console now, right? I'm pasting a chat and thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you so much. And as you can see, for example, what I've done already is creating an environment. When you create an environment, you just specify the name, like for example, test, and you decide what is the AC2 that will host all of these IDE, and what is the type of instance I need, what is the operating system, right? If I want to have some cost saving setting in order to set, for example, the auto hibernation functionality, right? Now, let's see, these are my environments, and the one I've created already is called Webinar Python. As you can see, doing that, I'm accessing my environment in Cloud9, and I have a folder. In this case, it's Webinar Python. And inside of this folder, I just inserted a simple file that is called S3 sample. What I want to do now is going through an example with you of how Bo2Free works, right? So easy as we are going to create a bucket, inserting an object, generating a pre-signed URL to access this object, and then destroying the bucket. But we are going to do that with code. So we are not going even to access S3 from the AWS console, right? So let me do let me know if you can read properly. If not, maybe I can do also some zoom. Okay, so everyone can read well. So the first two things that I'm going to do isn't just the first thing. I'm importing the libraries. In this case, is Bo2Free, and the UUID is a library that concerns me to create an ID, a random one generated. What I'm doing is, like, you can ignore the comments, right? I can share then with you also all of this code if you want to review it, or if you want to test it as well. So next operation I'm doing, as said before, I'm creating the S3 client, right? Using the functionality Bo2Free client. And I'm specifying that the resource is S3. I would like to have here the S3 functionalities. I'm defining a bucket name, and I'm calling this bucket Python SDK sample with dash, and then a generated ID, okay, random one, so it's different every time. Then show me that you've created this one, this bucket, list let me know if this happened and went well, right? And checking also the name of the creation, right? I'm checking his name. As you can see, in this case, the functionality, for example, to see if this bucket exists, right, is there's a functionality that is list bucket to list all of these buckets. And now, like, our goal here is to create an object and upload it, and we can do that with actually one line, right? In this case, I'm doing a put object operation on my S3 client. I'm specifying the bucket name. I'm specifying what object I want to create. What is the name of the key, right? Is the one specified here. And I'm saying what this object is containing. And in this case, it will be a string that is hello world inside this file. So when I run this, the object is created and uploaded, right? Then what we want to do is to generate. So let's suppose that we have to download this file. Okay, one of the most secure way in order to do that is to leverage the pre-signed URLs. Why? Because, for example, I can also set some expiration time, right, to when the link will be valid or not, to access this resource, and it could be a nice way of implementing this in your application, right? For example, let's suppose you have to download an image, for example, to display these images in your application, right? You just need to download it, but then you don't need this endpoint, let's say, pointing to the image to be public, right? You can just create a pre-signed URL, for example. So then it has an expiration time. Okay, then other things we are going to do here is just retrieving this bucket. I want informations about the object I just uploaded, and so I'm here displaying some information, like for example, object key, how the content length, the body, when it was the last time we modified, right? Those are all properties of the object, right, that I'm pointing to. So I can just leverage, for example, last modified as a field, as a parameter of this code, right? And then what I want to do is also delete all the objects in the bucket. I'm doing this through code, and then I'm deleting the bucket. So how to test this code? Of course, it will happen all at once, and we will see what happened in here in the console. So let me just, I hope you can read properly. Let me know. If not, I will try to increase and zoom. It's not working there. Okay, so if I'm going to run this code, you will see that it's actually doing what we were saying, right? It's creating, this is the URL in your browser to download the object. So if I click here, so as you can see, there's this field that is, for example, an expire value, but also all of these token that is generated in order to not pointing directly to this URL, right? So if I click open, okay, I'm able to download this file, and this file, as we remember, contains a string that is called hello world. Okay. Now, if I press enter now, it's doing as well what we were saying before. So providing information about the object and getting all the metadata that are related to the object, and then deleting the bucket, right? So we've managed all the upload of the file, we expose this file through a pre-signed URL, we download it, we delete the bucket, we did all of this without even accessing S3, right? Okay, now what I would like to show you is what I was saying before, right? So I would like to show you Chalice and how it works. Let me just have this in the, okay, and I will open, okay. So I will go back to my terminal, and what I'm doing now is creating a project, a Chalice project. So Chalice, new project, and let's call it hello world. Now I've created this Chalice project. Of course, in order to leverage the Chalice functionality, I just install inside the terminal Chalice. In order to do that, you can do pip3 install Chalice, right? It's just that you will see that in my case, it was already installed. Now, what is this project containing? It's just containing a sample application, right? And let's see what is this application doing. Actually, this application is just defining that application is a Chalice application, right, with this name. And what we are saying in this case is we are defining a function, right? Let's call it index, but it could be whatever, that is returning a string, a JSON, in this case, that is hello world. So, and this is what Chalice is helping us to do in this case, we are defining a route. It means that if we have an endpoint and we end up at this route of this endpoint, we will have this function exposed. Let's try. So now, if I move inside my project, and if I do Chalice deploy, you see in this part is creating the development package. So it's packaging all the files and is creating for me the IAM role that he called hello world-dev, and is creating the Lambda function right inside my account, and is also creating REST API. So what it's doing is just the REST API is creating this inside an API gateway. Let's go and see what it did for me. So if now I search Lambda, you can see between one of my functions that this function exists, and this function contains what I have on Cloud9, right? What we were looking at together. But this is connected to and exposed through API Gateway. Let's go and see API Gateway. As you can see, Chalice created for me a get method on the slash, so the root of my, let's say, endpoint, that is actually calling the Lambda function. So let's go back to our Cloud Native environment and let's click on the endpoint, because it's specifying here what is the name of the endpoint he created. So as you can see here, I'm in the API Gateway endpoint it generate, and actually I can see the hello world response that I was asking the Lambda to return. So easy as that, like with a couple of clicks, we created an API. But also we have as an advantage that is really easy to maintain, because what we have is everything here. It's everything in this hello world project. And I just do my changes. So for example, I can say instead of hello world, you can say hello restart. And again, deploy this. Oh, sorry, I haven't saved the file. This is deploy again these changes. And when I'm going now to this endpoint and refresh, you will see that the stuff changed. What do you think? Like, it's really easy on this side to maintain this kind of code, and the changes and all the things we were saying before are made quite easy, right, for you. Let's suppose that we don't need all of this project anymore. We can even destroy, let's say, delete all of the resources Chalice create for me just by with a command that is Chalice delete. Now let's try to make and add a functionality to this application. For example, what I would like to do with you is to create a URL, like with a, let's say, a more real API, and we are adding another function. Okay, I just copied and pasted the code. I can share down the code with you, but what I want to do is adding a route and add a functionality that is city, and then you can add and pass a city, and then it will map the city to, for example, to the state, right? I'm defining this map in here. So I'm saying that Seattle is actually in the Washington state and Portland is in Oregon. So now when I call the API passing the name of the city that is dynamic, I can get as an answer which is state, right? So let's deploy these changes and let's test it out. Chalice deploy. Now, do you remember API Gateway was looking like this because the resources defined were all on the root. But if now I refresh this page, you will see that for me, he has created also this resource that is CV. And then there's a parameter that is able to handle, and there's a GET request visible also on this. Now, what I can do in order to test is just say, okay, so instead of going to the root, go into CVs, and let's say that I want to know about Seattle. Yeah, we have our response. Let me do some zoom, probably you don't see. It's saying, yeah, the state is actually Washington. So what I want to pass as a message and on how this is just our way of implementing APIs or Python applications, right? But can you see how, let's say, with what agility we had in order to build all of this, right? Pretty easy. I delegate all of the AWS related stuff to Chalice, and he's sending by me API Gateway, the IAM role, that if not, let's say I can do this also click by click in the AWS console. But let's say it could be error prone, or is not even that much reusable, right? Because if I have to say then to my colleague, oh, do you want to implement something like this? I have to explain what were the click I did, right? Whilst if I have something like this, it's pretty also reusable, I would say. Of course, then now this is quite a simple API, but you can build whatever on that, right? And we can create our parameters. I remember also for a previous job I had also in previous jobs, I was implementing an API for a mobile application using Chalice, right? And yeah, at the end, Chalice is just the way of interacting, but behind, underneath, is all about Lambda API Gateway and IAM roles that are generated for you. Of course, what you can do, this is just Python code, right? What I can do is starting, as we saw before, starting importing Boto3, and maybe create and install the library, and then starting to create a function that maybe is able also to store stuff in a database or to query a database. I can definitely do that. The last thing, so I hope you find this, and I mean, at least you saw one of the ways. There are several ways of implementing Python web application. I mean, I saw the approach using containers. There's, I mean, really multiple ways of implementing Python application. I think this is really a nice way to show and to demonstrate. What I wanted to show you in Cloud9 is also the capabilities, for example, to that I'm using a lot of testing and trying other services. So let's suppose, for example, that I have to test some functionality about Textract. Okay, so Textract is a service. Let me show you. That is acting as an OCR, right? And is just retrieving information from images or PDF and extracting the text from there. So classical use cases, let's suppose you have a receipt, an invoice, and you want to extract information out of that in an automatic way, you can leverage Textract, right? So if I want to test its capabilities, what I'm usually doing is just Googling and finding some GitHub repo with some code. And in this case, this is a good example because the code is actually Python code. So what I do is just copy the Git URL as you can see here, is mentioning all the examples that are contained in there. I'm going to my Cloud9 environment, and what I can say from the terminal is, for example, something like git clone this repo. What it means? It means bring inside Cloud9 all the files contained in this repository, right? Clone this repository. And if now I execute this command, you will see that actually is generating a folder here that contains several Python scripts, right? The one we are going to test, just to see how it works, is the one that is taking in input a document, so an image, sorry, a JPG document. Let's go and see how it looks like. Is this one? Is actually an image. You can see it was definitely a screenshot of with some thing written in it, right? But this is not text. This is an image. And let's suppose now we want to extract the text from there. So let's go. Let me do a bit of zoom out. So again, as we were saying before, we are using Python. We want to interact with the AWS services, so we are using Boto3. Okay, so what the code is doing is importing Boto3, specifying what is the image name, opening this image, and starting defining in Boto3 that I want as a client extract, and then API call to extract, passing my image. Okay. I'm calling the detect document text feature, right, of the extract. And then I want to say to him, please print in the terminal all the output, right? So what are we expecting? Something like, sorry, I want to click here. Something like all of these extracted, right, as a string. So let me do that. I will go back to the detect local text, right? The file, my Python script, I will run it. Sorry, I run this from a different folder. Let me just do that from here. What is the name? CD Amazon extract. CD Python. Okay, I'm just locating myself inside the folder where the script is. So then when I run it, it can understand that actually this image is in this folder, right? So I can do that actually through the terminal, and I can say execute this code. So I will do Python 3. What is the script we need? We need the 01 the text local, right? Is this one. And if I execute this code, is extracting all the information contained in an image, right? This is a really nice example on how demonstrate the functionality of the service. And you see that actually we saw some Python code, we saw how to interact with the EI ML services, like for example, extract. We saw how it's possible to use, in fact, Chalice to deploy our Python code and expose our Lambda functions. And yeah, I mean, now it's up to you and your creativity and deciding how to use this code and how to interface and what service to use. I hope it was useful for you, and I will keep this time that we have left, these 10 minutes, to answer your question. If you have any curiosity, anything you want to ask, we can explore this. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thanks, Matteo. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much. We really have like 5 more minutes or 4 or 5 more minutes. If there is any question, I think Tim was monitoring the chat, and I haven't seen anything coming. So if you have a question, if you can please make sure that you post it in the chat right now, would be really great. And then we'll give them a minute or so, and then we can wrap up.
Perfect. What are your thoughts? Like, were you already aware of what is possible to do? Like, for example, using Talis, Motu3. Are you building something at the moment?
Yep, seems pretty quiet. So you guys, unless
also, every question you have, feel free. I mean, my name, I can post it in the chat, is Matteo Gabrielli. Feel free. I mean, if you have any question or something you are building, and I mean, if you want to ask me also something after this session, feel free to add me as well on LinkedIn or where do you prefer, and reach out. Feel free to do it.
Yeah, and they actually have an alias, Ask the Expert, that they can use. They are familiar with that, so they can definitely use that alias as well to ask questions at any time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So if there are no other questions at this time, we'll just close the webinar, and we'll be posting the recordings in the Canvas. So, and you guys, as I said, feel free to reach out to us through the support alias in Canvas or through the Ask the Expert alias. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
And have a nice day.
Thanks, Matteo.
Bye.
Bye.